Dear people of the Rainbow Nation, we really need to talk. I am not a stranger and I am not an enemy, but I am a family that has been watching something happen across the ocean and the savannah and the red roads of this continent and has finally decided to say out loud what has been whispered too long in corridors of African diplomacy, on the streets of Johannesburg and in the child rooms of shops that once belonged to someone's father, someone's uncle, someone's dream. This is not an attack, far from it. This is a reckoning, and it's beginning as a honest conversation between Africans must begin with memory. There was a time when South Africa needed Africa, not in the abstract, philosophical sense that African people sometimes speak of solidarity in well-lit conference rooms. We mean it is the most practical, material, dangerous sense of that word. There was a time when apartheid, a system so oppressive that the world eventually ran out of polite language to describe it. A boot on the neck of the black majority of South Africa. For decades, and Africa showed up. Prior to 1994, immigrants from elsewhere faced discrimination and even violence in South Africa due to competition for scarce economic opportunities. But while South Africa's black citizens suffered in a continent that your government and some of your citizens now treat as a source of unwanted strangers was outside those walls, hammering on them. Africa's state broke diplomatic ties with the apartheid regime, and at it when Western nations were still debating the economics of engagement, African leaders gave shelter, training grounds, and safe passage to ANC cadres who were hunted men and women. The frontline states Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania paid dearly in blood and sanctions and destabilization campaigns run by Pretoria because they refused to abandon the people of South Africa. African solidarity was not a speech, it was a sacrifice. Now let's speak of June 16. Every year, South Africa marks it as Youth Day. Streets are named after it, speeches are delivered, wreaths are laid. It is the day the children of Soweto rose up in 1976 against an education system designed to break them, and the apartheid state shot them in the streets. What many South Africans do not pause to remember is that the rest of the continent also claimed that day as its own. The Organization of African Unity, now the African Union, adopted June 16 as the Day of African Child. The continent did not steal the day, it honored it. It said, what happened to the children of Soweto happened to all of us. Your children are our children. Today, June 16 is a public holiday in South Africa, and today, some of the same South Africans who march in its name on that morning would spend the afternoon demanding that Zimbabweans and Nigerians and Mozambicans and Somalis pack their bags and leave. The irony is not subtle. It is not even irony anymore. It is a wound. Here is a question that deserves a straight answer. Why does an African need a visa to enter South Africa? Yes, it's a relevant question. A German does not need one. A British citizen walks in and an American arrives with ease. The very nations that designed, funded, armed, and philosophically underpin the apartheid system that South Africa spent generations fighting those citizens travel freely into the rainbow. But a Malawian farmer, a Congolese teacher, a Sierra Leonean journalist, a Ghanaian entrepreneur, they must queue, they must pay, they must justify their Africanness to a system that treats the former colonizers' passports as a higher credential than their own. South Africa has been grappling with sporadic and sometimes lethal xenophobic harassment and violence against African and Asian foreign nationals living in the country, including refugees, asylum seekers, and both documented and undocumented migrants. But the hostility does not begin in the streets. It begins at the immigration text. It is baked into the policy architecture of a country that fought for freedom with African hands and then built a sovereign border designed in practice to keep Africans out more than it keeps Europeans out. This is the contradiction the rainbow yet resolved. Now let's speak of what is happening inside the country. Yes, let's speak about the citizens themselves, because the story of xenophobia in South Africa cannot be told honestly without first telling the story of South Africa's crime and who is actually responsible for most of the crimes. South Africa has 4 cities, Nelson Mandela Bay, Durban, Cape Town, and Johannesburg, including the top 50 most dangerous cities in the world by murder rate. These are South African cities, not Zimbabwean ones, not Nigerian ones, South African cities. Murder levels average 64 per day in early 2025. 64 people killed every single day. The Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal provinces have the highest murder rates in the country. These are not provinces run by foreign governments. They are run by South Africans. A Pew Research poll conducted in 2018 showed that 61% of South Africans thought that immigrants were more responsible for crime than other groups. There is no factual evidence to substantiate the notion that immigrants are the main culprits of criminal activity in South Africa, even though the claim is widely spread. 61% believe something that the evidence does not support. That is not a statistics about foreigners. That is a statistics about the power of a lie, repeated long like truth. Persistent increases in crime over more than a decade were associated with a weakening of state institutions and a rule of law. Corruption at all levels of government roles and local criminal groups became embedded in many communities, leading to more illicit firearms, drugs, robberies, extortion, and kidnapping. That is South Africa government's own analysis, not a foreigner's accusation, the state's own admission. The criminals who hollowed out South Africa's public institutions were not Zimbabwean. The politicians who looted the state during the years of state capture were not Mozambican. The gangsters who run the Cape Flats with firearms and terror are not Nigerians. They are South African. They have South Africa ID books. They vote in South Africa elections. Mob justice is regularly meted out in informal settlements where police are mistreated and frustrations with high crime levels run high. The mob that burns a Somali man's shop, the mob that beats a Zimbabwean. Countrywide, 849 murders were ascribed to vigilantism and mob justice during 2017-2018, rising to 2,124 during 2022-2023. The mob justice that burns a Somali man's shop, the mob that beats a Zimbabwean in an ally that mob is contributing to South Africa's murder statistics, not reducing them. And yet, every few years, the streets fill with fire. In 2008, the worst outbreak of xenophobic violence in the country's democratic history tore through communities across South Africa. Armed mob destroyed homes and property owned by migrants, murdered over 70 people, seriously injured thousands, and wounded over 100,000 migrants out of their communities. 70 people killed, not because they committed crimes, because they were foreigners. In 2015, it happened again in Durban, in Alexandria, across the country. Africans were hunted. The South African National Defense Forces was deployed. International repatriation flights were organized. Malawians, Zimbabweans, Mozambican people who had built lives and businesses and families inside South Africa fled for their lives. Between January and September 2019 alone, South Africa recorded 68 attacks and 18 people died. More than 147 shops were looted. 50 businesses, predominantly owned by Africans from across the continent, were destroyed or damaged during the September 2019 riots in Johannesburg alone. Nigeria recalled its High Commissioner. South Africa businesses MTN, ShopRite, MultiChoice were forced to temporarily shut down across West Africa in retaliation. The African continent told South Africa again that what it stopped, and South Africa apologized again. And according to Witwatersrand University's xenophobic attack results in 669 deaths, 5,310 looted shops, and 127,572 displacements in South Africa between 1994 and March 2024. 669 on African soil killed by Africans for being African. Then came Operation Dudula, launched in 2021 in Soweto, the same Soweto where the children of 1976 died for freedom. Operation Dudula was conceived by South African youth activists to address crime and drug usage. But today, the movement is better known for calling for mass deportation of undocumented migrants, blocking immigrants from accessing healthcare, raiding businesses belonging to foreign nationals, and forcing their shops to close. The Izulu word Dudula means to push out. Yes, that is what it meant. The children of Soweto, or at least those who now claim that inheritance, are pushing out the people whose grandparents helped carry Soweto's story to the world. Originally a social media campaign, Operation Dudula became an umbrella for mobilization of violence, protest, vigilante action, targeting migrants' own homes and businesses, and even the murder of foreign nationals. Xenophobia in South Africa is often explicitly racialized, targeting low-income black migrants and refugees, and in some cases, some South African citizens accused of being too black to be South African. Can you imagine that? Let that land too black to be South African in a country where blackness was once the only criterion that marked you for oppression. Now blackness itself, if it comes with the wrong accent, is cause for suspicion. Politicians are using migrants as pawns without regard for their safety. In an attempt to score votes ahead of elections, anti-migrant discourse from senior government officials has fanned the flames of violence, and government actors have failed to prevent further violence or hold perpetrators accountable. The United Nations said it clearly: South Africa is on the precipice of explosive xenophobic violence, and perpetrators enjoy widespread impunity for xenophobic rhetoric and violence, leading to a lack of accountability for serious human rights violations and the flourishing of racist and xenophobic political platforms. And now, last week, we have Igbo King Saga on March 14, 2026 in Kumbo City in the East Cape. Members of the Nigerian Igbo diaspora held a ceremony. Solomon Obona Eziko was recognized as Igwe Indi Igbo, now Eastern London, a title used by Igbo community to designate a cultural leader during the ceremony held in the Kumbombo area. Videos spread across social media. South Africa erupted. Protesters, church vehicles and buildings allegedly belonging to foreign nationals in protest against the installation. About 26 Nigerians were injured and hospitalized, while property including cars and shops worth millions of rands were destroyed. The Nigeria High Commission said the Igbo Eastern London Festival was merely a cultural event and not a coronation, citing cultural practices such as New Yam Festival, masquerade displays, traditional marriage rites, and chieftaincy title ceremonies as key aspects of Igbo heritage. The Deputy Acting High Commissioner issued a formal apology saying, "I offer our apology to the traditional institutions in South Africa. We say sorry for whatever has happened. The embassy will never in any way encourage undermining the authority of their traditional institutions." Now, this documentary must speak to two rooms at the same time. So South Africa, the installation of diaspora cultural title is not a territorial claim. Igbo community across the world, in the United Kingdom, in the United States, in Ghana, in Canada, use the title of Igwe to organize their cultural affairs, to preserve their identity, to provide community leadership in a foreign land. It does not make a kingdom. It does not challenge a country's sovereignty. It is a people refusing to forget who they are. The anger may be understandable, but violence that followed was not justice. It was the same old script dressed in a new, and now to our Igbo brothers and sisters in South Africa. You know what kinship means. You understand most the weight that a throne carries, the ancestral authority it represents, the land it's rooted in, the people it speaks for. A king is not chairman. A king is not a community president, and you are not on your land. This is not the first time an Igbo diaspora kingship title has sparked controversy abroad. In 2025, the installation of Eze Tekwe in a 2 has Eze Indi Igbo Ghana triggered widespread protest and public outcry across Ghana. In both Ghana and South Africa, the recurring issue is the same. A symbolic Igbo cultural title within diaspora is being interpreted by some local as a claim to political authority or territorial recognition. This has now happened twice in 2 African countries in 2 consecutive years. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a pattern, and the responsibility for breaking it lies with you. You can honor your culture without provoking your host. You can preserve your identity without making others feel that their land is being claimed. Call him a community leader, a cultural ambassador of the Igbo Union. There are words that communicate leadership without triggering the ancient fear that a foreign people are planting a flag in your soil. Wisdom is not cowardice. Knowing when a symbol inflames more than it unifies, and choosing a different symbol is not a betrayal of Igbo pride. It is Igbo intelligence, which your ancestors had in abundance. Dear Rainbow Nation, Africa did not ask for a debt of gratitude. This is not what this is. Africa's solidarity during apartheid was not an investment expecting a return. It was the right thing to do, done because Africans understood then, even if some have forgotten now, that we are bound together in a way that no border policy can fully undo. But solidarity must be reciprocal, not to repay an old bill. It is the only thing that makes us strong. This is worth considering. A World Bank report found that immigrant workers in South Africa generate approximately 2 jobs for local citizens. These are people creating employment, not consuming it. They are building in a country that is not theirs, paying taxes in a system that barely protects them, raising children who go to South African schools, shopping in South African markets, worshipping in South African churches and mosques. They are not the reason South Africa's electricity fails. They are not the reason corruption hollow out the state. They are not the reason the gangsters of the Western Cape have made whole communities ungovernable. The real causes of South Africans' pain are real, and they deserve real accountability from real politicians, real institutions, and real structural reform. Burning a Somali man's shop does not fix a failing power grid. Deporting a Zimbabwean nurse does not prosecute a corrupt official. Beating a Malawian trader does not bring back the billions stolen during state capture. It just adds another wound to a continent that is already bleeding from too many places at once. June 16 is coming. The children of Soweto will be remembered again. We ask only this: remember also what it felt like when the world refused to see your humanity, and then look honestly, look at what is happening on your own streets.